A number of people have been asking me to review how it is we build fluid layouts for HTML pages as opposed to the static widths that we were doing at the beginning of the semester. So I thought I would do a quick page with some divs and review what we went over in class as far as working with fluid layouts. So I've already started a page here. Just our basic setup. I have an index file saved here. You can see that I have a reset CSS and I have a styles.css. The reset is just the plain vanilla one, and styles is empty right now, just a place to work there. And I did go put my meta viewport in place so that it's ready to start working on mobile. So from here, we just need to start putting our page structure in place. So I'm going to click up here at the top and I'm going to go insert my first div. So I'm going to do an insert div, and I like to start at the outside, work my way in. So I'm going to start with my ID of container. And I'm going to go ahead and use the new CSS rule button here and kind of build as we go. So new CSS rule. It's an ID, pound container, that's good. I want to go make sure that it's saving into my styles.css file. Okay, and I'm going to say OK. And it can let me start working on some rules. So let's see, the main thing I need to do is I need to go to the box category here, and I can put my width in place here. And so now we're working with percentages instead of pixels. And so that's really the main difference here. Anytime I'm working on a width, I need to call it out in as a percentage as opposed to pixels. So my container, we were working with 1,000 pixels before, but at a percentage, it's going to be a percentage of the browser window. So I'm going to say 90%. Okay, so it'll almost fill the browser window, but leave me kind of some margin out on the edges there. And I still want this to center, so I'm going to go to margin, and I'm going to go to the right and make it auto. I'm going to go to the left and make it auto. Okay, so that's nice and simple. And you know, while I'm here, I'm going to go to background, and I'm just going to give it a background color of white, because I might give my body a background color that's different. Okay, so that's the main thing I need to do. I'm going to say OK, and OK, and there is my container div right there. And you can see over here, let me rearrange this a little bit. In my selectors, there's container right there. Now, let's make one adjustment on this before we keep moving forward. I have a width of 90%, and I have my auto left and right margin that are going to center it. But it could get to be too wide at some point. So I'm working on my laptop. I have a big iMac sitting over here next to me. It's got like a 27-inch screen on it. So if I have my browser window open all the way, 90% of that is quite large. It's bigger than I want it to be. So I'm going to come back over here to container, and while my width is 90%, I want to give it a max width right here. And I'm going to put that in pixels, and I'm going to tell it to be 1,000. Okay, so that's that number we've worked with a lot. So basically, if it's smaller than 1,000, it will go out to be 90% of whatever that size is. As you stretch the browser window out, it keeps getting larger until it hits to be 1,000, and then it won't get any larger than that. Okay, so 90% width, max width of 1,000 pixels, auto left and right margin, and I've got a background color. In fact, you know what? Let's do one more quick selector. I'm just going to go do the body, because I said that a second ago. Let's do a body selector, and I'm just going to put a background color in it so that you can kind of tell where we are. I'm just going to do a neutral gray out here. There we go. So now you can see my work area. Okay, there's the beginning. There's my container. So I'm going to build a rather standard layout that we go with. So within my container, usually the first thing is my header. So I'm just going to click up here within my container div, insert, and I'm just going to build with divs right now, keep it simple. So insert a div, give it an ID of header. Okay. Now, do I need any CSS rules? I could go create CSS rules if I want to put a background color in there. Let's see what else. That's about the only thing at the moment because it doesn't have any content. I don't need to call out the width because I want my header to be full width. And by default, a div is full width of the containing element. So I'm not going to create any CSS rules at the moment. I'm just going to say OK and insert it. Okay, so there's my header right there. And probably down in code is the easier place to see it. So there's my container around the whole thing, and so far just a header in place. Okay, now I'm going to create a 2-column layout. So I'm going to put a sidebar in. Let's look back at code again. I want it to go after my header, so the easiest way is in code to go at the end of the header div. I can hit a return if I want to. And let's go up here and insert a div. Sidebar is usually a class, so let's give it a name of sidebar. And I'm going to go ahead and create my CSS rules while I'm here. So new CSS rule. Make sure that I'm saving into the correct file down here, and I'm going to say OK. And now I'm up to the point of doing rules. Now, I can give it a background color if I want. In fact, you know what? I probably wouldn't in my design, but just so it stands out right now and I can tell what I'm working on, let's just give it kind of a light green right here so I can tell where it is. Now to the box category. Now width. Let's think about width for a minute. When we started building those, we went with 1,000 pixels wide, and then we were making our sidebar be 250, our content div be 750. We were keeping the math simple. So we were doing 250 pixels. Now I want to work with percentages, and the beauty of this is the relationship between 250 pixels and 750 pixels. All I have to do is drop a decimal point. In other words, I can make this be 25%. Okay? And at 1,000, that is 250 pixels. Okay, so I like that. That's nice and simple to go there. Now, that's easy if I don't want any padding or margin on here. Okay? But I probably am going to want some padding. So let's come to padding. Let's turn off the same for all. And if I were to usually build this with, let's say, 10 pixels of padding to hold my type or my images off of the edge. Okay, so 10 pixels. Again, if I shift the decimal point 1, let's see, I'm going to start with, actually, you know what, I can go all the way around. Let's leave that same for all. And if I were going to do 10 pixels, again, I can shift it by 1 decimal point, and I can say 1%. Okay? So 1%. Now if I make this 1% and I want it to occupy 25%, then I need to come here and I need to subtract from this. This being 1% all the way around means it's 1 on the left and 1 on the right, so there's 2%. So I'm going to take 2 off of this and make this be 23%. So you see 1% on the left padding, 23% of the width, 1% on the right, gives me 25% overall. Okay? So I'm going to say, oh, I should go up here and tell it to float, left, and say OK. And say OK once again. So there's my sidebar. Okay, back in code, I'm going to find the end of my sidebar div, hit return from there. Let's go insert my content div. So insert div, a class named content. New CSS rule, make sure I'm saving in the right spot. I say OK. Let's see, I might as well do background color just to help me track where things are. I'm going to go for a blue-gray. Okay, over to the box. Now, we know that we have been doing 750 on this, 750 pixels. So again, that would be 75% if I just want to follow that simple math. But again, I want to look at padding, and I probably want some padding around here. Now my sidebar has right padding, so I don't need left padding on here because I don't need it to be twice the size there. So I'm going to uncheck this, and I am going to make all of these be 1%. So top and right and bottom can all be 1%. And then, so left and right is what deducts from here. There's nothing on the left, but the right is 1. So I'm going to come up here and make this be 74%. And again, I'm going to come tell this to float to the left. And I'm going to say OK. And OK. And there you can see how they sit next to each other and they fit just exactly right. Okay. Now, yes, my type is hitting the edge of this, but I'm not planning on leaving those background colors. That's just kind of so you can see where things are. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go put a footer in here. So again, in code, I'm going to go click below my content div, insert a div, an ID of footer, and it usually goes full width. Okay, so I don't need to assign it a width, and I don't have anything going on with it, so I'm just going to go ahead and say OK and insert it. I just realized I do need one thing. I need a clear float on it. Okay, so with my footer selected, let's come over to selectors and create a new one. And simplify that. And I can come right down here and go to clear and say clear both, and that pushes it down to the bottom. Okay, so that is a very, very basic layout, but it's the basic layout we have worked with a bunch. Come take this extra type out up here on container. That way my header can go to the top. Okay, so there's my basic layout. The main thing here, let's see, let's go save. Save all related. And let's come down here and let's preview it in Firefox. There's my page. So what I want you to see is, okay, there's the 1,000. That's the widest it gets. But as I get smaller than 1,000, you see how it's taking up 90% of my browser window. Also, you see that my columns are resizing as we go also. Okay, so that's how they adjust. Now, this has no media queries in it. This is not responsive. It's just fluid, so it just keeps getting smaller. Okay, so that's what we've done so far with it. Just realized one more thing we could do real quick. Let's go back into content. I can go into my contents. Here's my content div. Let's put 3 floating divs in here. Say I've got 3 images I want to go side by side. So here's my content div in code. I'm going to give myself some room here. That text can stay there for the moment. I'm going to go inside content. I'm going to insert a div. And let's say I have some featured images I want to use. So I'm going to use a class. I'm going to say featured dash image. Okay, oops, image singular. And I'm going to say new CSS rule. Make sure I'm saving in the right spot and say OK. Now let's stop and think about this. What I'm going to do is up here where content is, I want 3 items to go across. And let's just let them use all of the space that is there. Okay, so let them fill that space. So let's go to the box category, and we need to go to width. And because what I'm doing, when I call out a percentage here, it's relative to the element it sits in. So in other words, these divs that I'm working on right now, the featured image div, the percentage width is in relationship to the width of content. So if I want them to go 3 across, then I would do 33 1/3%. So I'm going to say 33.3%. You can use decimals in here. I might change this later if I come put padding or margin. I'm going to keep it simple first. So 33 1/3%. I'm going to tell it to float left. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to say OK again. Now up here, you can see there's my div sitting right there. It doesn't have a background color in it, but you can see it right there. Okay. Now I saved an image a minute ago, so I am going to, let's go down to code. I'm going to come down here and get rid of the text that's in it. And in my div, okay, so I'm in my featured image div, I'm going to insert an image right there. So insert image. In my images folder, I just put this video thumbnail there. So I'm going to say OK. I'm going to insert that right there. And it is 250 pixels wide, which is probably a little bit bigger than what we're after. But let's keep moving here. I'll show you how this is going to work. So basically now I have, let's see, there's my div. I could even put this back on one line again. So this line right here, line 16 of my code, has my featured image class on a div, my image is in it, and then the div closes. So that's the whole div right there. There's a space I can get rid of even. I want 3 of these. It's a class. I can use it over and over. So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to copy it, and I'm just going to give myself 2 more. And there we are. Okay, so I've got 3 across. They're floating, so they sit next to each other. And they're percentages. Okay. So the one thing that I need to adjust right now is I need to put one rule in place for the image so that the image resizes within that div. Okay, so I'm going to click on the image. I'm going to come to selector and hit plus, and I can simplify that down so that it's any image within featured image. Okay, I'm going to come up to the top. My width needs to be set to 100%. And what that does is it lets the photo or the image resize to the size of the div. So it's going to be 100%, so it's going to go out to the edges of the div. So in this case, you might have noticed that it made my image just slightly smaller. Now, so that they don't distort, I need to go to height and just set that on auto. Okay, so those are the only 2 things I need on there. Okay, so I've got that in place. Let's go do a save again. Let's go preview this again. Okay, there's my page. Oh, that text is in the way. That's okay. We'll just work with it. Okay, so this all looks the same. But now you notice as this goes in, you see how my images are getting smaller. Okay, so the 3 featured image divs, because they're percentages, they get smaller. And because I put the rule on the image itself to be 100% within that div, they get smaller as well. Okay, so this is my fluid layout. You can keep building this way. Probably the next thing that comes to mind is in my header, if I create nav in there, and my links, my A tags, you remember that we put widths on those and then tell them to float to go next to each other. Well, instead of doing pixel widths on those, I would do percentage widths on those, and they will resize as well. Okay, well, hopefully this helps clear things up, and you can always let me know if you've got questions. Thanks.